Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very, very warm welcome to each and every one of you. Welcome to Invest Karnataka 2025, the Global Investor Meet, an event that brings together visionaries, industry leaders, policymakers, and innovators to reimagine growth and unlock new possibilities in the land of limitless opportunities, our Karnataka. I'm RJ Pallavi, your host for today, and it's truly an honor to stand before such an esteemed gathering of global delegates, business leaders, and investors who share a common vision of driving progress and prosperity. Now, under the theme of reimagining growth, the event is more than just an investment summit. It's a platform to forge partnership, exchange transformative ideas, and explore the vast potential that the state has to offer. We are proud to have participation from over 18 countries with over 75 global business leaders and investment proposals in the pipeline. So, ladies and gentlemen, to kickstart this remarkable journey, we have a power-packed lineup of speakers and dignitaries who will shed light on the economic vision and investment roadmap. So, without further ado, let's begin this momentous occasion. Our first panel of the day is Sustainable Manufacturing, Driving Growth in the Global Green Economy. And our moderator is Mr. Simon Long, who is editor-at-large at The Economist. He has joined The Economist in 1995, and since then, he has worked as Southeast Asia Bureau Chief based in Bangkok, South Asia Bureau Chief in Delhi, and for 6 years as Chief Asia Correspondent and an author of the Banyan column on Asia based in Singapore. He has also edited the Finance Asia and International section and worked as the digital editor. He wrote extensively for The Guardian and many other outlets. So please put your hands together as I would like to welcome him on stage. The stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Pallavi. That's a very warm introduction, and I'm very, very pleased to be here. Many of you will have heard me already, I think, if you joined the last session remotely, and it's particularly good to be here to talk about what is in many ways a central theme of these 2 days, the sustainable manufacturing, which addresses, I think, the core issue at the heart of what we're talking about here, which is how can new technologies be harnessed in a way that promotes growth but does not destroy the planet. I'm very lucky here to have an extremely distinguished and learned panel to explore these issues, whom I will now invite up on the stage. Let us start with at the end there, Burjis Godrej, who's the Executive Director of Godrej Agrovet. Burjis, welcome. Thank you. Please.
Thank you.
And then next to him is Shalini Goyal Bhalla, who's the Managing Director of the International Council for the Circular Economy. Thank you. And then Rami, Ahola, who's a partner and global industry leader for IBM Consulting, here all the way from Helsinki. Thank you so much. Please. And last but by no means least, Daisy Chittilapilly, who is president of Cisco for India and SAARC. Daisy, hello. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Shalini, I'd like to start with you, with if you like, the big $64,000 question, the core of this. I mean, can they be compatible? Can growth and sustainability go hand in hand? Just as a way of framing our discussion. And perhaps you could also just explain, because maybe many people like me are not familiar with your council, explain the work you do at the Council for Circular Economy.
Sure, Simon. Thank you. About the council, we were the pioneer organization that started working on circular economy in 2020 as a think tank when India was hardly talking about circularity. The initial objective was to bring in policy which is related to circularity in the manufacturing processes, which is a very important topic that we are going to discuss today. But along with that was also the gap that we realized, the gap in terms that while industry will have to look at circularity, do we have the workforce? No, we didn't have. So how to bridge that gap? Skilling people, that was the second most important pillar. And third was helping the existing industry to make a green transition. So educate, innovate, empower are the three pillars that we work on. But having said that, a constant question that comes is sustainable growth and economic development, does they go hand in hand? And I believe the place where we sit, India, is the best example of saying yes, certainly it does. We have a remarkable target that we have given to ourselves, if you look at our NDCs, 500 gigawatt by 2030. And as we look at this energy transition, as we see in 2020, we have almost 200 gigawatts of installed capacity, and we are very readily moving towards the target of 500. By the way, the target of 500 was increased from earlier target of 450 gigawatts. It's a revised target, and we are very confident that we will move forward. Again, coming to energy transition, a country like India has not only focused on the renewable, but we are also finding a lot of other alternate renewable sources like the biogas. We're talking about green hydrogen, and the policies that government is bringing in green hydrogen and biofuels are actually seeing a sea change on ground as well. Being an agrarian society, we are looking at how we make our agriculture go green, which I think Burjis is going to explain largely, so I keep myself from it. But at the same time, every single sector, if you see, is looking at a green growth. I would come to specifically the infrastructure. If you look at the statistics today, India will be building 70% of its cities going ahead. So 70% of development is yet to happen when we talk about Viksit Bharat 2047.
So 70% of its cities?
Viksit Bharat, so developed India, by 2047 is the government's target. When we look at that, the statistics say that we yet have to build 70% of that infrastructure. So while we are looking at that infrastructure development, we are looking at how that can go green. Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs is looking at making the cities more livable and sustainable, but at the same time, when we talk about industry, let's talk about the hard-to-abate sector like cement, which is looking at making cement more greener. There are alternate sources. They're using all sort of waste, including the slag from the blast furnaces, like being used for manufacture of cement, which makes it more greener. At the same time, the buildings that we are coming up with, the infrastructure, then we come to textiles. Again, the Ministry of Textiles is focusing on a green development by using alternate materials, alternate fibers, which is again a focus towards making the textile industry, which is a huge industry in India, go greener. And last but not least, I think one of the most important sectors that I would also like to talk about today is the electronic sector. India is generating a huge electronic waste, but there are cluster development that's happening in India, which is leading to not only the recycling, but effective and cost environmental friendly recycling of the electronic waste. So I think these are enough examples to kind of show that while we are developing, while we are looking at the growth, we are looking at sustainable growth as we move forward.
Thanks. I should say, by the way, that I will leave some time for questions from the audience at the end, but if anybody has a point that where they feel it is particularly relevant, try and attract my attention, and there are microphones that can be brought to you. But Can I turn to you, Daisy, to look at the problems, if you like? I mean, what are the biggest obstacles to manufacturers, such as yourselves, to adopting sustainable technologies in India?
I think, firstly, I want to preface it by saying, like Shalini said, we've come a long way, and we're on a good trajectory. If you look at the lead indicators of green energy capacity we're building out in the country, electric vehicle growth in our metros, at least to start with, the number of lighthouse factories that we have in the World Economic Forum, conversations around great examples of how this should be done and so on. But I think 3 or 4 things we still have to solve for, and let me talk through them quickly. You know, Shalini talked about this. We are a growing country. We will be one of the largest, we are already one of the largest economies in the world. We will be even larger in the next few years. Our infrastructure requirements are very high. And that also has made us, on the sustainability side, one of the largest markets and requirements in the world too. I mean, if you look at environmental technologies, we are the 5th or 6th largest market in the world. If you think about air pollution, solid waste management, we are the 2nd largest requirement in the world. If we talk about water, wastewater management, we are the 5th largest market in the world. And the Prime Minister has declared an energy independence goal by 2047. Now, this is great opportunity, but what happens in such an environment is there is also a evolving regulatory and policy conversation. And businesses tend to look for an end state of regulatory and policy before they start moving, because they're just worried that the investments they make, will they be in line with what the country's blueprint is? So that's one thing where the dialogue needs to be, I think, more and more, and the Government of India, parties like Shalini, industry players like us, we are all part of that conversation, which is the good news, but I think it is a problem to solve for. That's definitely the first one. I think the second one is the infrastructure itself. Like any new technology, green tech is also growing exponentially in capabilities. We can't yet say that everything's mature. If you take green energy as an example, and you know, at Cisco we are today 96% green energy in our India side.
So how much?
96.
96.
96, and we'll be 100 this year. But when we look at that journey of getting to that number, in green energy, we still have things like intermittent power production, which affects the grid reliability or our plant's reliability.
This is wind and solar.
This is primarily solar in our case, but India has a lot of wind as well, and then new initiatives around hydrogen, etc. But this broadly applies to all of it, right? So there are inconsistent, you know, technology is still in its ramp up phase. So there are maturity concerns, reliability concerns, efficiency, not so much efficiency concerns, but reliability concerns around newer technology till it comes up to speed and scale. And related to that, the ecosystem and readiness. Shalini talked about skills. If you are moving to a green way of doing things, people have to have the skills, you have to have new processes, you have to have new tools. So all of that is work in progress. And last but definitely not the least, you know, we are a country which is always doing more with less, and that phrase acquires a whole new meaning in Indian businesses, in government, and the public space as well. So we are always, I think, in businesses carrying technology or technical debt. So there's a big gap between where we want to be versus where we are today. And do we also have the bottom line health to drive some of these newer initiatives? Because upfront investment in new technology is always expensive. And most businesses are having shorter and shorter ROI measurement cycles, right? So like I said, last but not least, cost pressures are also a big part of it, particularly in a country like India where resources are limited, and I think resources are limited all over the world, but the crunch is particularly acute in countries like India where the growth requirements are so much more. So it's a combination factor of a evolving and emerging policy and regulatory framework, a developing technology landscape, a developing ecosystem landscape, and definitely, the upfront investments and the ROI cycles that some of this has
You're
to
a
be
business,
met.
right? So the ROI calculation is in the end always going to be the ultimate decider.
Always. So these are the four things to, I think, continuous work in improvement, I would say, for this adoption to become mainstream, right? More mainstream than it is today.
Rami, if I could turn to you, turning from problems to solutions. You work around the world. I mean, what examples can you see of sustainable technologies being introduced that could be globalized, could be exportable?
So, if I look at it on a global basis, I think our perspective is that it's really all about data and leveraging data to make better decisions and to enable people to make better decisions everywhere throughout the organization, not just at the top. So if I look at, let me take 3 examples. A lot of the work that we do, we actually use IBM itself as a guinea pig or client zero, if you will. IBM operates somewhere north of 600 facilities around the world, and we're currently feeding all of the sustainability-related data from all of those facilities into a central database where we can then start contrasting and comparing. We all know that there's a million things that we could do to reduce the environmental impact of a facility, but we want to focus the efforts to those things that are going to have the biggest bang for the buck. So essentially we're feeding all of the data back to a central repository looking at, okay, what are the things that are going to have the largest impact, and start tackling those. Rinse and repeat, and you get to a point where, the impacts, of course, get gradually smaller because you've tackled the big ticket items, but you keep making progress. And we're on a global level, we're at this point, starting from, I think, a 2012 baseline, we're down 65% in CO2 emissions, well on track to our target of being net zero by 2030.
But this slightly begs the question, isn't it? What if the data tells you that an unsustainable technology is more profitable, is better for your company?
Sorry?
What if the data, you're saying that the big potential is in exploiting data better, but what if the data shows the answer you don't want, or we don't want to hear, that the unsustainable technology is the better one for your company?
So it is better. I think invariably we see that the environment or sustainability and profitability are not at odds with each other. It's not just us, it's across the board. We see 2/3 of executives that we survey saying that it's in line. But if I take a second, 2 more examples, just looking at outside of IBM, it's, a company the size of IBM can do quite a bit on our own, but for smaller entities, you have to sort of pull together a number of entities to actually make an impact. And this is something where we've done work with utilities. As an example, a Danish utility that we worked with to build a platform that allows their industrial and retail customers to connect to and basically adjust their electricity consumption based on when sustainable energy is available. Not sunny and not windy, you have a lot less of renewables available than many of industrial manufacturing customers, as well as, let's say, retailers, for example, have the option to reduce their consumption a little bit. It doesn't scale infinitely, but it does. So creating these industry platforms, if you will, to share the data across multiple entities enables them to do a better job at sustainability. And as Shalini mentioned, the third example I wanted to touch on was a consumer electronics one, where CO2 is really not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is electronics ending up in landfills. We are doing work with one of the biggest cell phone manufacturers in the world to essentially make recyclability information available at the point of impact, which is engineering, so that the engineer developing the next version of the phone will be able to choose when they make design choices. It's not just about performance, it's not just about cost, but it's also now about recyclability. So if I have two choices that are kind of neck to neck in other parameters, I can choose the one that is easier to then, at the end of its useful life, take apart and recycle as either raw materials or components. So I think the common thread here is leveraging data, drawing useful and actionable insights from it, and then making those insights available at the point of impact where people can actually make choices based on that insight.
Thank you. Burjis, it seems, if I could turn to you, it seems to me you're in an interesting position at the intersection of agriculture and industry. I mean, quite literally, in food processing. Do you see lessons from agriculture that can be transferred to industry or vice versa?
Absolutely, Simon. I'd look at this holistically from both agriculture and food processing being more like manufacturing. So one very successful example we've seen in our business and our industry is in our sustainable oil palm cultivation initiative. Oil palm is a crop that has a very bad reputation globally, particularly given the deforestation that often happens with it. So we are doing this very sustainably by replacing rice, rubber, areca nut with oil palm, trying to see how we can grow oil palm on wastelands so that there's no deforestation involved. And we're using technology for this as well. We're using technology on the drip irrigation side to make sure that we can use AI sensors to ensure that the crop gets just the right amount of water that it needs, not excess water, and this will help with climate resilience as well. We're using technology to map out the plantations so you can see where the crop is growing well, not growing well, using technologies like NDVI, which shows you the total amount of vegetation. And then on the manufacturing side, we're using ways to check the quality of the fruit that comes into our mills, to check, how much oil content there is, how ripe it is, and then those mills are powered by waste material from the plant, like empty fruit bunches. So they're 100% biomass, 100% renewable, and that is contributing to greater sustainability in the industry. So using these sort of holistic case studies, I think we can really see how they can apply to other industries as well. And in our case, we've had no problems using this. We're very happy with how it has worked out. We're seeing no financial costs as well. The business is doing extremely well, and we're getting very good buy-in from government and other stakeholders. So I think there's a lot that other industries can learn as well about how to use this throughout the value chain and how to promote it among all stakeholders, farmers, end customers, explaining the benefits to all of them.
Thank you very much. Shalini, if I could come back to you and ask you about the role of government. I mean, clearly, government has a key role to play here in setting incentives, setting rules, regulations, or as to what technologies are employed. But if Rami is right, and the sustainable choice is always, in the end, going to be the economically beneficial one, what does government need to do?
So for a country like India, where the population, we are the most populated country with 1.4 billion people, the choices have to be smarter. And that starts with the government. Government being the largest procurer, it is important that they start looking at procuring sustainable products if they want to make the impact at a larger scale. There are policies that have been introduced by Government of India, like the Plastic Waste Management Rule introduced EPR in 2016. We have seen that the efforts on reverse supply chain including the recycling of plastic has increased from around 60% to 76% since 2016 till 2023. But at the same time, if we also look at the recent change that came was about including 30% recyclate in plastics. So what happens is all these policies, when they talk about, the industry has to mandate that it happens. And our conversation with industry shows very significant efforts towards including the recyclate, which is a closed loop. And whether that's happening and monitoring is all data-based, has to involve technology. A very simple example is the CPCB's EPR portal. So EPR portal, which was introduced by the Central Pollution Control Board, was to see the certificates that have been generated for EPR. The discrepancies, the false certificates were caught last year and companies were penalized. All that came through the data. All that came because we were digitizing the entire chain. We were trying to understand how that's happening. Another slightly different example is the DPI, the digital public infrastructure that India is talking about. So we see how we have digitized the financial system, the entire system. The currency note in circulation has reduced, but we are talking about the UPI today, which is uniquely different and appreciated by many other countries, including France, who's buying it, integrating it with India. Now, having said that, I think technology and the sustainable growth goes hand in hand. While there are policies like the digital passport, product passport in EU, India has its own way of tracking and tracing the entire supply chains, and these are developing as we speak, be it in materials, be it the supply chain, because most of our MSMEs are integrated into the international supply chains. So this transition is happening gradually. Certainly it can be faster, I can say, but at the same time, the transition is humongous. If you look at the numbers, they are supportive of the integration. As we sit here in Bangalore today, most of the startups, we did a study on startups last year, and what we realized is 74% of startups do realize and are working on integration of technology, including AI, to work out a business model which is more cost effective and has a data backing to whatever they are saying. So certainly from entrepreneurs to the big industry to the government, everybody is relying on substantial data that we could work on, and that's where the technology and sustainability will be going ahead and is moving as we see today.
Thank you very much. Perhaps Daisy and Burjis, I could ask you what could the Indian government do to make your path to sustainability easier? Like, Burjis.
Sure. So I think the biggest thing we need to focus on is offering more green financing to the SME sector, the MSME sector, your medium, small, micro enterprises. Because if you look at large enterprises, they can access this financing quite easily. But how do we get the smaller companies, the ones that really contribute the bulk of job creation, really contribute to the economy, really the backbone of the economy? How do we get them thinking about sustainability, green technologies, renewable energy? So we have to find ways to offer financing to them. And we as a company are thinking about our Scope 3 emissions very seriously. We've realized that we are doing a lot, from our side to improve our use of renewable energy. We're now at 80% renewable energy in the division I'm involved in. We're trying very hard on energy efficiency as well. That's very much the lowest hanging fruit. That'll really pay back economically as well as environmentally. But we have to spread these messages to the smaller companies, get them involved, highlight successful case studies among them, and offer them financing, and work with other countries on this. Like Europe, for example, there's CBAM, there's the anti-deforestation initiative that are preventing a lot of goods from entering Europe if they don't meet certain criteria, which is all well and good. It's important to have high sustainability standards, but you need to work with developing countries, you need to work with the global south on spreading that message to them and offering financing and other kinds of financial incentives to get them to make that transition. So that's what I'd really encourage, more international cooperation on this.
Daisy.
I think green financing is a very important aspect of things. And I agree with Burjis, it is particularly not so much for large companies, but for the ecosystem of manufacturing in particular has a very big SMB ecosystem, right? So for them, for sure. And I think I talked about policy. In a country, when the policy framework is evolving, they can also be perceived, and I'm using the word perceived very specifically here. There can be perceived uncertainties around subsidies, incentives, and how much time they are guaranteed for, etc. So clarity around some of those. Financing is, of course, one access path to money and planning for your business. But the other thing is to have certainty around other incentives, subsidies, and so on. What periods of time will they be available for? If they're going to be changed or withdrawn, how will that phasing happen?
You're not questioning Indians' democratic traditions, are you?
No, I'm not questioning, but there are. I mean, and this is not right or wrong, right? It is also to do with the fact that we are growing so fast. It's actually sometimes the government it's necessary for the government, where green energy is a great example, especially in the commercial use of green energy. When we started in India, there was a necessity to incentivize that even for large companies.
Sure.
Because the rules of pioneer, follower, laggard is the same here. 20% people will do it for the right reasons. Some people will do it because it's compliance, and some won't ever do it. So there is incentives and there's also compliance, and the government uses, I think, both of these conversations to encourage the country to a sustainable future, an energy independent future, a net zero future by 2070. So I am not questioning India's democratic values at all. I am a very proud Indian. But when we are in this spurt of exponential growth, we can have some ad hocism or perceived ad hocism to some of our policies and how they move and change. And I think Shalini will be much more of an expert than I am. We have a very limited view from our vantage point, but that certainty, I think, financing certainty, particularly for small companies, subsidies and incentive certainty for everybody. I think one of the values of democracy is that we can speak freely to our government about what we need. So.
I thought somebody talking to us.
Someone wants to weigh in.
You wanted to weigh in or ask a question? Or?
So could you wait for a microphone, please?
Sure.
Can't hear you at all.
Sorry.
Hello, I just want to kind of say Mr. Burjis was, Mr.
So
Burjis Godrej.
could you hold the mic a bit close to your mouth? Could you introduce yourself?
I'm Ram. I'm from Chicago. And I was recently in Switzerland, in Geneva, talking to a few bankers about some initiatives. And I thought what Mr. Burjis Godrej said was spot on, right? We were actually talking to a few smaller banks, probably a couple of weeks before Davos. We wanted to beat the crowd. Of all the initiatives which it suggested, even smaller banks were interested in funding sustainable initiatives in India, right? And they were saying, we're getting like $100 billion, $200 billion back from China, the investments in China. And we see India as an opportunity, right? But at the same time, they're like asking about how is the Indian government allowing us to give loans in India directly? That's a big problem. And again, moving the money back to Europe or the US. I think some of the regulatory framework need to be aced up. I understand the experts are sitting there and they know the reasons why they're not acing it up. I'm not saying anything about that, but I'm saying we got to kind of find a healthy medium, right? To get some of those investments to scale up the sustainability initiatives in India. I mean, government cannot fund everything. We should use the money which is available in the market, especially when Europeans are interested in socially responsible and sustainable initiatives.
Thank you. Do you wish to respond, Burjis?
No, I do agree with that. I think we have to work more closely with other countries. It's concerning that, there's so much interest in China and in doing this in the developed world and not India. And it's something that India and the countries of the global south should work together on. So happy to talk with you after about that as well.
Thank you. One issue we talked a lot about in the previous session but haven't touched on yet, and so much in... You can't hear me?
Yeah, actually, we have problems hearing
Well,
anybody.
yeah,
from the back
I'm
either.
finding it very difficult to hear the panelists too. I don't know if there's something that can be done about that. So, you okay? Rami, you can hear me.
So.
One topic we haven't talked about in this panel very much is artificial intelligence and AI. And we tended to talk about new technologies as being a benefit for sustainability, that they can be introduced. But AI, of course, has this huge downside in the amount of electricity and hence in carbon emissions that it uses. I mean, how do you see that problem?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I talked a lot about data, and the amount of data that we have in our use today is much more than any human can comprehend. So AI and generative AI in that sense is a must in order to make sense of all of the data that's coming at us. But I think there's a couple of elements to that, and especially with generative AI, I think we're still in sort of a honeymoon phase where everybody's experimenting and taking first steps into really utilizing generative AI in production. And when you're just experimenting, it doesn't really matter all that much how much energy your model is consuming. Once you start taking it to, let's say, 100,000 users or 1 million users or 10 million users, it matters a lot more. And so what we're seeing in experiments is people using the best possible generative AI model to produce the best possible results. Where I think we need to be going towards is using the smallest possible model that still gets the job done. Because that's, energy consumption is more or less directly proportional to the size of the model. So you're going to a world where it's not going to be llama or GPT models for everything. It's going to be more specialized models. As I keep telling people, take the crappiest model that still gets the job done for as cheap as possible. The other element to this is, of course, what does the model run on? And right now, all of it runs on GPUs, which, frankly, do a much better job at AI inferencing and AI model training than traditional CPUs, but it's still not built for AI. It's built for graphics processing. And so there's work ongoing on that front as well to develop specific AI acceleration units. I mean, GPUs were built for accelerating graphics. Now they're great for accelerating AI as well, but we can do more on that front as well, just to bring the technology that you use in order to actually run the model, make that more efficient as well. So that, I think, is kind of two fronts: size of the model and right model for the job, and then what's the underlying hardware that the model runs on.
I mean, I was asking you this before, and I wasn't entirely joking. I mean, how do you know what is the right size model to use? Do you have to ask an AI bot to tell you?
So how do you choose the right model?
Yeah, the right size, yes.
So I think when you're building your, whatever it is that you choose to do with AI, it's going to be trial and error and experimentation anyway. As part of that, you probably, the approach that we're taking right now, and I'm not saying that it's going to be the approach that's going to be taken forever, but it's basically start with a large model, to prove that it's possible to do what you're trying to do with generative AI. Once you've proven that, then you start going back to smaller models, try out, you know, if I run 9 billion parameters, a 9 billion parameter model today, can I get the job done with 1.5 billion parameters? Yes. Well, can I go down to 300 million parameters? And so forth. So you kind of start at the high end, and then you start scaling back. But to answer your question about, you know, whether you have to ask AI to find the right AI model, I think ultimately the answer will be yes. You will have a way to get to the target faster. Right now we're starting at the top and then going down. I think ultimately you'll get to a point where you get relatively close based on AI.
Does the same go for working out the cost-benefit analysis between using AI and the benefits being produced? I was thinking, for example, of a few years ago, I visited a very intelligent irrigation system in Israel, which is very short of water. And it was a brilliant system with sensors, so it gave the crops exactly the right amount of water, saved a lot. And I'm sure by now that is AI run. You would ask, because AI would be much better at making that calculation right. But I mean, how would you gauge the amount of carbon emissions that generated by the AI bot making that calculation against the saving in water at the other end? Is it even possible to do?
It is possible to make the comparisons, of course. Then it's always like, what do you value higher? CO2 emissions versus water usage, when it's two different things that you're comparing. But I think ultimately, in most use cases, you are going to get to a point where it does make sense to use AI.
Simon, so if I can,
please
just add to this conversation. Can't hear me? Okay.
Question? Okay.
Now? Just about?
Yeah, let's Daisy make a remark and then we'll come to you, madam. Yes, sure.
Yeah. No, so I think all the concerns are valid. I just want to say that... Mine's not working.
If you can hear me, Daisy said all the concerns are valid.
Why don't you take this, Daisy? Why don't you take this and see if it works?
Let's just start using this from now on.
That's okay.
Solve the problem.
Hello? Yeah, now it's definitely working.
I can hear you 3 times.
Three
now.
times.
Don't just twice.
Yeah. So I think, Simon, all your concerns are valid because the data center power that the world is consuming now is the entire electric consumption of Japan at this point. Right? So it's certainly something that the world should be bothered about, but I think it's very early days. I was talking to one of the consulting Big Four about how many production users they have. They're running 570 AI pilots all over the world, but they are pilots. So that's the point Rami was making, right? Training, yes, definitely we are pumping a lot of data into a lot of these large language models. But the value of AI is in inferencing. And inferencing doesn't need, for all use cases, the same horsepower that we are using of the big large language models. And inferencing is still at a very nascent stage. We are still training. We are still in the training data world. Inferencing is the next step, which is here in pilot stage. But inferencing will do 2 things. It will break the computing footprint from the current huge, these terawatt data centers that people are building, to smaller footprints that enterprises will build, governments will build, because everybody wants their data to be held inside. They don't want their intelligence to be broadly available to models worldwide. So I think the real power of AI is in inferencing. Inferencing will, we are future gazing a little bit here, but inferencing will not require at this point, our assessment is, it will not require the same for all use cases, it will not require these megawatt, terawatt data centers that is scaring the world right now on AI. But the power problems are very, very real. You know, when I said we are 96% green energy, we are one of the largest ER&D footprints in India as Cisco. What that means is we run very power-hungry data centers in this country. So we're not just a building with some people working off lower power consuming. We run some very heavy power consuming data centers. So it is important for India as it builds. One of the things Shalini didn't mention is data center has infrastructure status in India today. The data center capacity in India will become at least 20x in the next 12 to 18 months. So it is necessary for this country to think about sustainability, power, AI in that it's valid. But the other thing I always say is, let's not over-regulate, because over-regulation kills innovation. Yeah. Right? So AI is still in nascency. Let's not kill it. Yes, it's important to govern. Yes, it's important to regulate. But let's not kill it before it's had a chance to prove to us what it can do.
Madam, I haven't forgotten you. We'll come back to you, but I think both Rami first and then Shalini wanted to respond, jump in immediately. So we'll do them first and come to you later.
So I think a lot of the discussion until today globally has been around the data centers that run massive AI models and kind of talk about bringing all of the data to a big power-hungry data center. I think what we're seeing rapidly happening is actually a move towards AI on the edge, if you will. So running small models, much smaller models. So let's say, for example, in a vehicle, you don't want you don't want your autonomous driving system to depend on connectivity back to a central data center and the latency of that connection. You want to do that within the vehicle, and you're not going to have, you know, a megawatt data center in your vehicle. So it has to be a much smaller model running on much lower power, and we're going to see the same in, let's say, agriculture. You're not going to be able to bring all the data back. Even if you had the compute power, you're not going to have the bandwidth to actually move the data around. So I think the conversation is maybe a little too focused on centralized AI, whereas the world is going towards distributed AI on the edge.
Thank you very much. Shalini. So your microphone.
Hello. Yeah, okay. Simon, my answer would be a little different from the AI and the perspective technology. Since today we are talking about the green growth, and that too in manufacturing, we must understand one thing. When we talk about sustainability and we talk about green growth, it is also about seeing inward and analyzing that everything that we do, is that essential, or that's by the perspective of the industry that you need to consume it. So we are becoming a consumption model. Do we really need to consume, or we are made to consume, is something that will drive the green economy as well. We need to understand the growth doesn't only come by numbers. I think while we are talking about sustainable production, the equally important aspect of it is sustainable consumption as well. And for circular economy, I think one of the things that we need to see is reduce. That doesn't mean that we reduce the kind of development we are talking about. It talks about reducing our footprint, reducing about the need that we have, or make our systems more resource efficient, deliver the same result within the same infrastructure that we have. So I believe industry plays a very important role in looking at more efficient transition. So for example, for better understanding of the audience, I remember when we were child, the bulb that used to lit was like 40 watts, 50 watts, but today we have LED, and same light can be delivered by 6 watts of LED. So that's the transition. We have become more efficient in energy because lesser energy consumption could result in the same light. Then the models that we are talking about, are we really thinking about service-based model from just product-based models? I think another very important perspective that the industry needs to look at is, are we inclining that service-based model? And there is a huge competition and a huge opportunity that lies, especially for India. We say that there will be 50 million green jobs by 2070. That's a huge number. While we are talking about unemployment today, we are talking about green skills today, we also need to see that there is a transition within the business model, and industry needs to understand that apart from just the manufacturing, it is a lot more on the service sector to gain, and there will be a lot of competitive advantage when the industry look at that kind of change. So I think that's another perspective that we are missing in our discussions and should be integrated when we talk about the sustainable development and green growth.
Thank you very much. Madam, you've been very patient. Thank you.
Hope this works. Thank you, sir. Thank you to all of you. Quickly, so my name is Vidya. I represent Reput, R-E-P-U-T. It's a startup on sustainability, on traceability. So we have two challenges here, right? So one is we are looking at blockchain as a technology, because in sustainability of supply chain, there are various, nodes. They can be suppliers, vendors, whatever. So this is establishing trust on each of them. How do you establish trust on each of them? Because again, in India, there's only 1 or 2 layers where they can get onto Hyperledger or any of the self-sovereign systems. The rest of them are in villages, in towns, and it's true for Southeast Asia. They all upload data in using paper ledgers or maximum Excel or CSV sheets. So how do we establish trust? So have you guys, whether it's Cisco or IBM or ICCE or Godrej, ever thought about how do we practically really apply blockchain technologies to the sustainability? And related to that, with the computing power, how on earth do you decide how much GPUs do we need, the data centers? AI is fine, but even before AI, let's say I'm saying this is a very definitive way of calculating, computing, and we know how much, trillions of petabytes we need. How do we even do the calculation? Are there any frameworks? How do you guys go about doing it? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I can answer the first one. So I'll answer the blockchain one. Our understanding is that there's still a long way to go for blockchain in many sectors of the economy, particularly those that involve the MSME companies, because their data quality often isn't always good. You have to make sure that data quality is good, you have the right data, it's credible, it's verifiable before you start thinking about traceability. So there needs to be a bigger initiative to verify that quality of data. So that's the first part of it. Second part of it, from an environment point of view, is that we often use these foreign coefficients to think about, how much methane is being produced, how much CO2 is being produced. But that's not always true in the Indian context. The sustainability standards are very different and the emissions are very different. For example, we are in the dairy industry, we are in the soybean industry, if not directly, indirectly with suppliers and customers. And when we actually took the effort to measure the emissions of, methane and things like that from farmers, we found that it's very different from those foreign coefficients. It's more sustainable in the Indian context, understandably, given that we use less resources. So how can we develop these Indian standards? We have to think from a more local perspective. That's key. If we can do that, then we can definitely use blockchain for environment.
So I didn't quite understand your second point, Burjis. Greenhouse gases are fungible, right? So standards have to be international.
Yes, they do have to be international, but you have to think about, what's happening at the local context. For example, Indian farmers, of course, you know how much, emissions of methane there could be, from using a particular amount of fertilizer, but how much of fertilizer is going to be used. at the farm level, for example. So that's what I meant to say on that, you know. Like how long will a cow live? How much methane will that cow produce? You have to think about that, you know. It's based on the feed. It's based on many different things. It's based on the breed as well, the genetics. So you have to think about what's happening in the local context.
Rami.
Maybe, can you guys hear me? No, not yet. Now you can, I guess. So maybe just to comment on the blockchain question. So IBM was early in bringing blockchain technologies to the market. I think the challenge that we've seen over and over again, I'm going to use an analogy. Everybody wants to drive on the motorway, but nobody wants to pay for paving it. So the usual problem is that everybody stands to benefit, but it is really the first adopters that end up footing the bill. And so making these blockchain, you know, making blockchain commercially viable, it's challenging because of that. It's kind of the tragedy of the commons, if you will, in one way.
Thank you very much. I think we have another question in the front row.
Yeah, so this is Professor Koka, CEO of Kenka Renewables. I recognize Bridge. I'm Professor Koka. How are you?
Hi, how are
Good.
you?
And this is what we are trying to talk on: sustainable manufacturing, driving growth, green economy. See, the point is here, we have to work on the energy level, and we are working on the green energy through Napier grass to produce CNG and hydrogen. So this is more on the rural applications and direct employment for the rural women and farmers. So somebody said blockchain. I think it's a too big slogan to use right now, especially if we're trying to work on the driving growth and global green economy. This is my point. Thank you.
So was there a question in there? I didn't hear.
Yes, my point is there's a lot of green energy projects like us, what we are going to work on, Napier grass, and so to produce CNG and hydrogen. So the question is, blockchain and all that, you know, is a too big terms to use as the agricultural green energy projects. That's what I was trying to talk.
I think a little bit to answer, not exactly, but to your thing, there are efforts that are happening at the rural level. I hope you're aware of the aspirational district program by Niti Aayog. The idea is to help the people at the grassroots level, starting from our farmers, to have an additional income. Looking at the development of rural India not from the perspective of the global development, but looking at indigenized development and what we call ourselves, what could be the growth of this rural India. Another very important aspect that the government of India is looking at, stop the urbanization of rural India. So the schemes like the CNG, the biogas, the green hydrogen, ethanol is to benefit the farmers and build a parallel economy for them. And I think this is a very measured way to work. As we speak here, India Energy Week has started in Delhi. A lot of announcements would be done by big companies like ONGC and others, which focus on particularly the rural aspirational program, where we involve the parallel economy at a grassroots level. I believe that would be one way. While we talk about technology, on the other hand, which we cannot surpass, technology will always grow hand in hand, but how do we grow parallel is what we are looking at. And that's why what Burjis said, the India model is different from the other model, and we must appreciate the efforts of having recognized the power of indigenizing the things and not just copy-pasting from some other world. That's I would say should answer that.
If I can just add to the connection between technology and growth, because that's, I think, where your question was. The government report on India's $5 trillion economy, one of the concerns around manufacturing is that manufacturing and agriculture contribute the same to India's GDP. Agriculture contributes 16%. 60% of our people are in agriculture. It contributes 16% of the Indian GDP. Manufacturing also contributes 16 to 17%. So the Indian manufacturing sector is a sector of promise, of opportunity, and also challenge. Right? Because there is inconsistent industrial output in India. It's also plagued by the fact that many subsectors are cyclical in nature. The government's own ambition is to move manufacturing in India to become at least 25% of the GDP by 2030 when we become a $5 trillion economy. And the power of technology, as the government's report has identified, is 8% additional to that GDP. Right? So you can do the math very simply that the government wants to take the GDP contribution to 25% and the role of technology to up productivity, reduce waste, and do it in a sustainable fashion. The government's assessment is 8% addition to the GDP. And similar statistics is therefore agri also, right? So the power, and I'm not saying it's blockchain, but I'm saying all technologies, let's focus on green tech. The whole purpose of green tech is to up efficiency, reduce wastage, potentially get us new revenue streams from new products like you're doing. You said hydrogen, biogas, etc. New products, new revenue streams for this country, which are sustainable in the long term, make India energy independent. So the exact number we're going after is that 8%. And there are reports, like I said, at the government level reports on which technology, where, how, which subsector. So I hope that answers your question.
Sure. Just a quick point to add. I completely agree with what Daisy and Shalini said. It's very important that we build up our agri-economy by giving these additional streams for the farmers and also cut down our reliance on foreign imports of oil, petroleum, replace them with green sources that we can have locally. Because India is so rich in arable land, we just need to improve our agri-productivity and give more know-how to farmers. And that kind of bridge where we move from agriculture to food processing, bioeconomy, that's a great way to improve our manufacturing share of GDP. And will also help us given all the forex challenges we face with a lot of currencies depreciating against the US dollar, harder to import material. How can we get more domestic self-sufficiency?
I see we're into the red zone, and there's a big sign in front of us saying time's up. But did you want to have a final word, Rami? No. Well, thank you very much. I think that was quite a nice upbeat note on which to end what to me has been a rather encouraging panel. And the answer to the question I raised right at the outset, asked Shalini, seems to me you're all in concord that sustainability and growth are absolutely in harmony. Indeed, that one depends on the other. So thank you all very much. It's been a very, very illuminating panel, and thank you for your questions, audience.
Thank you.